Hello everyone, welcome to Product Stories. This is where I meet and talk to some of the best product and design folks in the industry. Our guest for today's episode is Radhika Sen. Radhika is a graphic designer turned UX designer. She's currently working as a UX designer at Microsoft. In this episode, we talk about various topics. We talk about studying in a design school, what is interaction design, and how can one get started with it, her exchange program in Germany, and at the same time, we talk about one of our most challenging projects. I'm your host, Kaushik Mulli, and you're listening to Product Stories. Hey Radhika, super happy to have you here on Product Stories. I'm so excited to have you as guest. Welcome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hey Kaushik, I'm really happy to be here as well. Currently working as an interaction designer at Microsoft. And prior to that, I have had my education in graphic design, followed by master's in interaction design. I also have worked for Schneider Electric. Along with that, I also had the exposure to sort of work as a visual designer at Cognizant before pursuing my master's. And now I work for this product called Dynamics at Microsoft, like I mentioned. And we're looking at multiple aspects of CRM, how the different channels can be brought together in terms of communication. So that's the space that I am currently working at.
Super interesting. So, one of the things which you mentioned, right, which is that you started out with graphic design and now you're an interaction designer. You studied interaction design and now you're a UX designer, right? So,
Yeah.
how did that transition happen?
So, well, it started with my mom being into fashion designing early on, and I used to get like, and I'm actually starting the story really early on, but let's do that because that it talks about that journey. So I used to have this question as to, hey, I want to do design, and I really did not know what are the different disciplines of design. I used to like any kind of like I used to get exposed to graphic or advertising or fashion and textile, and I used to like everything. So I was at that phase where I was like, okay, I like everything, but where do I actually begin? And that's where my education sort of brought some kind of focus. So I did this foundation course at Sophia's where you have like a bits and piece of like everything that you practice, and then you get an insight as to what you like, and you can then go ahead and do your graduation. So before I did my graduation, that 1 year course where you try out everything, that's where I started deciding as to where my focus should be. I was very, very interested in advertising. So that's the reason I picked up commercial arts as my undergrad. Once I started getting into the visual design nitty gritties and understanding the typeface and how you can use different elements and colors in different ways to sort of even predict or even to use a trend in a certain way. So those were very interesting to me, or how a logo has a certain value, or why is it designed, and like how every line and every dot can have a different message. Those kind of questions is what really interested me. But that's where I also have this thing that I like to try out anything that comes my way. And after graduation, I sort of got through this campus placement in Cognizant, and that's a space where I got exposed to visual design, for which we refer to as UI, for digital space. And once I actually was a part of the team there, I started getting this exposure with the UX team as well over there. And I was like, hey, that sounds interesting. That's like you have a whole bunch of people working on the architecture of the app, the wireframes of the app. So that's where I actually got interested in why the UX and what's of the UX. So um, after actually working there for 2 years, that's when you transition. Like in certain projects, you're working as a designer, and then you also get a chance to work as a UX designer, or very closely to some of them. And that's when you start learning. that's also when I decided that I want to do my master's and transition into interaction design.
So
So yeah.
that was like super interesting. Like I'm really curious about that 1 year course which you did,
Hmm.
where you got to try out like different areas. Was it with respect to design, or what was it like?
Yeah, it was with respect to design. So they start with like it's not just like technical different disciplines of design being thrown at you. It's more like they'll fine tune you, teach you the basics of design, talk about different color palettes, talk about observation, talk about still life, and so on. Like the basics of art also. So you start with that, and then you transition into the second phase of that course where they expose you to different types of printing, weaving. They'll also teach you advertising or the basics of what a print layout looks like. um, from there you also go into understanding what what a fashion designer's life would be like, or what a product designer's life would be like. So you get that exposure. And because uh, I went to Sapphires for my foundation, Sapphire Polytechnic in Bombay, that's so they had their uh, textile and fabric and all of that happening at the same place, like applied arts and textile and all of that. I also used to go and peer learning, so you can just walk into their class, see what they're doing, how they are playing with materials. And I feel that exposure is has been very helpful for me early on in the career, because in my educational journey, because that's the space where you have so many questions, especially if you're coming from a background where you've grown up wanting and really liking to draw and paint and like doing all sorts of crafts. Anything and everything that has even a little bit of color or any shape that interests you, you're going to get attracted towards it, and you're like, I can do that as well, I can do this as well, let's try that out. So being able to sort of then narrow down and say that, okay, no, I am very sure I want to get into applied arts. That I think that was a very, I didn't think I could make that journey, because I was like, Ma, I want to do interaction design, and I want to do graphic, and I want to do this, and I also want to do interior design. So it was like this whole confused state. So yeah, that's where I feel that kind of exposure sort of helps you even decide.
True, true. And I think that kind of exposure is something which you tend to get in a design school, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things which I probably want to talk about with you more is that in my scenario, most of the people around me, and I personally never went to a design school, and most of the people around me also are mostly self-taught designers, right? So I really want to understand what are like some of the advantages one has when they study from a design school, and it could be both the advantages of it and the disadvantages of it. But yeah, I'll let you.
Right. Yeah. So, if you have to ask me about the advantages of a design school, the only most important thing that comes to mind is the peer learning and the art of questioning. So, at when I joined NID, I would say I sort of transitioned from you start understanding what's the difference between art versus design. So you're actually trying to solve a problem, and when you're trying to do that, you're not just trying to create layouts or create a painting of sorts. Layouts is still you're trying to solve a problem for an ad, for example. But I was in a space where I used to do things because I felt this message needs to go out, which I continue doing, but that's a different line of thought. And when I went to NID for my master's, one of the biggest things that I realized was that when you're trying to solve a problem, you start questioning every little thing. Not only you also are okay with peers around you questioning every little thing that you have done. So when you're presenting your work, there are like these bunch of 15 students and your professors who are asking you the questions that you probably wouldn't have even thought about. So, and like the details, like, hey, this interaction versus that interaction, or this concept versus that. Why was it? Those kind of discussions and the kind of peer learning. So one thing to I'm not sure if uh, I don't know if a lot of people really know about this, but our class at NIT or even today is a mixed bag of people. So there are engineers, there are graphic designers, there are architects, and so on. So you have people from different backgrounds, and so they bring extremely different perspectives. So I feel that peer learning and that art of even having to go back and look at why and how this is bringing value. Those are little details that I feel um, help shape you as a designer.
Yeah, definitely. And like, in between going to NID and your previous design school, you also did like an exchange program, right? I guess in Germany.
Yeah, that was
So I,
no
I
that
would love to know more about that.
yeah. So that was from NID. I in the second year of NID for around 6 months, I went to HTW in Berlin, and we were supposed to basically try and understand their um, the courses that they have and the assignments that they have in store for us. What was interesting is that HTW and Berlin in general being so product focused, they are like so really like good at it. um, every every project that I did was around a physical product, whereas before that every project that I did at NID in Bangalore was screen based interactions. So that was the first time that I actually started. So there was this project that we were doing at HTW, which was about a walking stick, a smart walking stick for elderly people. And before I could even get to the interactions, right, I landed up having like around 4 weeks of plain discussion and studio time as to if that form is even ergonomic enough for the person to hold it. Then you get to decide the screen size, and so those are not that was not my way of thinking. So I feel that the way they think about products in general, that is something that I have that was new for me, and I really do appreciate having the opportunity to even go through that process.
True. So, are you talking in terms of like how designing for a physical product is so much more different than the digital product design which we do? Or is it just has to do with how comprehensive folks at like Berlin are when it comes to design?
Now I would say that uh, as an interaction designer, the first thing that comes to you when you have this brief in front of you, that design a walking stick or a smart walking stick, my my first thought was that, hey, these are the informations that I want my or these are the scenarios I want to cater to, and these are the kind of interactions that will help my user. Now what I had not really thought about was um, how big that screen would be, how would they be holding it, and then where would they be seeing these details. So when you are exposed to the product aspect of it, the physical form aspect of it, you start to realize that that's like you have the entire experience chalked out in front of you, but now you have to also think about the limitations that come with the kind of real estate or the kind of material you're playing around with. Is it going to be a metal walking stick or a wood walking stick, or and so on. So I feel that not coming from a product background, that was something very new. And also yeah, with in Germany, you sort of see that they pay a lot of attention to detail in terms of material, like hardwood versus like softwood. There were like discussions about how old this tree, like with my professor, literally I had these discussions, how old this tree is, and so this wood will be more durable. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting because I didn't think about all those aspects of it. So they're like, if you have this kind of a machine that you want to like, put it within this socket, then this wood really needs to be like really sturdy, or it you or and also the fact that it will become heavy. So do you think it will be user friendly enough for or elderly person? And there are those questions that they are so well versed with, which was extremely new to me. So yeah, again, like, going back to design school, I feel these kind of questions, like, have you thought about this versus have you thought about that? Those are the line of or the chain of thoughts that make you or start making you realize where your project is headed and how you can improve.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, especially the whole softwood versus hardwood part. Like, yeah, that's something I would have also never thought of. And yeah, I mean, I'm super fascinated to know how design is so different for people, right?
Mhm.
Like how everyone has a very different approach to design, but still somehow come together to create the same set of
Yeah.
things.
No, I absolutely agree to you. And in fact, that's where I feel like, the whole concept of we're breaking away from the concept of triad, even in our workspaces, right? Like PM, engineering, design. There are so many different verticals that need to come in, like content designers and marketing people, or even for example, like the research team. So instead of having like this term triad, if you like now we're moving towards the term squad. So you start getting and you start taking into consideration perspectives of these multiple different people because they're coming from such different backgrounds that they share those insights, which help you early on in the in your product phase, rather than you build something and then you go to research, or you build something and then you go to content and you say, hey, just fix this for me, or I don't know what string to use over here. If they are a part of the ideation phase from the early, like, early stages, I feel it's very important as a designer to sort of, and it like, take it as a responsibility to then ask them to, be a part of it, involve them, get their inputs and shape your journey.
Yeah, true, true. So I'll move on to the next question, which is something which I have noticed a lot of people who are just starting out with design, right? One of
Hmm.
the problems which they face is there's just so many terms, right? There is UX design, there's UI design, there is interaction design, there's motion graphics, then there's whole illustration, then there's visual design, communication, so many things, right? And it's so overwhelming. One thing which I would probably want to talk to you about, something which you expertise, right? Which
Hmm.
is what is interaction design and how is it different from UX?
To answer your question about interaction design and UX design, frankly speaking, it overlaps a lot. Interaction design, which is IXD, versus UX, which is user experience design. When you think about it itself, it gives you a sort of idea as to how it might be different. User experience design is something where you're talking about the user's entire experience. So you're talking out um, their journey while they come. It could be anything: downloading the app from the app store, or onboarding, and every little detail in their entire journey. So there are absolutely like a lot of aspects to it. Versus interaction design would be the you focusing down on one particular scenario where you're picking up like factors that either are specific to one particular screen or one action, and you're sort of focused at that. So it's like a zoom out versus zoom in sort of an explanation, if I would have to if I had to put it. So you kind of take the entire experience, you look at the entire user journey. That's where you're shaping the entire user experience. Versus interaction is where the user is interacting with a certain aspect of the design. So it's just, I would put it as, think of it as zoom out versus zoom in. And I think both the, it goes hand in hand. I don't think you can really say that it can be separated. I mean, it overlaps a lot.
Yeah, I really like the zoom out, zoom in analogy. I think that makes it like super clear on the differences and uh, I mean I do get the overlap part, but the small tiny nitty-gritty differences which are there, I think that clearly sums it up. So let's say I'm someone who's just starting out with design, right? And if I wanted to learn interaction design, how would you suggest that I go about it, or for anyone for that matter?
So I would say that if you're really interested in this space, um, the first thing to ask, if you want to do any project, for example, right? The first thing to ask is that what is that problem you want to solve? Then start off with asking who is it you're designing for. Ask you a bunch of questions to yourself, like who are you designing for? Why are you designing it for them? Why do they need it? And then go ahead and sort of try and create solutions around it. I would say the idea of keeping the focus on your user and understanding what their day looks like versus what kind of phones they have, or laptops they have, and why you're, where would they be while they're using your solution, on the road, at home, at some shop. Those kind of details through research, like through understanding your users more, will sort of give you an understanding early on in the phase to where you want to take your project towards. So to start off, like, a lot of people do this, and I completely believe that it's a mistake, is to directly jump from the screens, or start understanding, hey, these are the design guidelines for Android versus these are the design guidelines for iOS. I think the main focus for any, like, person starting off should be the questions, like, why, how can I make this easier for them, what is the aim of this app, what am I trying to achieve, what are their pain points. Once you know those details, your solutions will be way more like well defined and sound and informed. So I feel you can all, like, everyone should start off with just whiteboarding and post-its all around you, and mapping what you want to do and who you're doing it for. So yeah, and yeah, sketchbook. Always have a sketchbook with you, like, draw draw the wireframes, draw their journey, draw their day, what it looks like, what they do at 6 a.m. versus what they do at 2 p.m. Sketch it all out. It helps a lot. I really enjoy it more than help. I really love doing these little tasks, and you get more invested as well while you're doing that, because you start knowing and empathizing with your user. So yeah, I
Yeah,
would
true.
say start off with
And
those questions. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. That's like probably like a very different answer I've got for anyone, like as a guideline for anyone who want to get started with design. I mean, not just interaction design, right?
Mhm.
In design in general, right? The advice usually I've always got it like read material design guidelines, read uh, Apple's human interface guidelines, and etc. Right? So yeah, I'm super fascinated by that part, and it's very interesting also. I now when I think about it, I feel like I want to go back and relearn design that way, and not probably not the way I did, but yeah, I can always still do that. Um,
Yeah.
coming to the next topic, right? So
Mhm.
you work at Microsoft as a UX designer.
Yeah.
So some of the things which a person would be curious to know is like, what does like your day look like? What does your routine look like? What kind
Yeah.
of work do you get to do? So that's something
Right.
personally I'm also interested to know. At the same time, I'm sure a lot of people
Do
would
you
love,
want to
love to
know
know this.
about the best day or the worst day? so, so yeah, there's no one answer to this. I can tell you about the happy days, like my happy days. That's when you sort of go to office, you already know what you're working on. You have received the clarity that you needed by asking the right questions to your PMs and your researchers and so on. And then most of the times, right, the struggle for designers, and I'm not talking about just at Microsoft, like everywhere, is that you sort of get these set goals that the product team wants to achieve, right? And it's your responsibility to then navigate through those those defined problems, and probably even ask the questions as to is that even required. So when you do get that clarity and when you know what you're doing, the best kind of days at Microsoft for me is when I can get my PMs, I can get my research squad, I can get my engineering into one room, and sort of whiteboard the entire problem out, discuss, hey, this is what I want to do, or this is how I see it going. When the engineering is right there, they kind of tell you, hey, these are the technical, limitations that we are facing because of so and so, reason or dependency, and then you're trying to as a team come together and solve that problem. Those are the best days when I can, or there are days when I have had the chance to create or conduct like workshops with people after having designed. That's also something that adds a lot of value because you're getting their perspectives, you're getting their feedback all at the same time. So it's not like you're working in a silo, you're not working or you're not having multiple feedback sessions with like different people at different times. And then you're getting completely different feedback and you're getting jumbled up. Like, those kind of episodes happen. So that's the best kind of days for me is when I get like the entire team together, um, sit and talk about it. Even, and that sort of, extends into lunch. You're having lunch with them, discussing the same problems. You come back, you have like a focus hour. You're then going back into design. Yeah, and then you go back to sort of again testing it out. So I feel like there are different aspects to it. Now, if you want me to like elaborate a little, I really like the fact that there are other activities that you can do in office. When we did go to office, I miss those days, but when we did go to office, there were like you could play, you could have PT time, you could go ahead and do anything. You could jam. There was a music room, so you could do all these other things which sort of help your team members, um, just casually, and you're way more aligned and you're way more in sync with the people you're working with. But yeah, work wise, I feel I mean, I sort of missed it in my previous organization. So here, I really like the fact that everyone around you is open to spending that amount of time with you, trying to get to a common problem, sorry, common solution. So yeah, that's something that I'm not sure if I have answered your question.
No, I mean it's always interesting to know even the tiny aspects of uh, I mean your work, right? It's I mean I personally liked whatever you talked about because the whole idea of getting the engineering team, the product team, everyone together in one room and like trying to figure out and arriving at a common solution. I really love that aspect of it. Um, like something I'm curious about, which you were talking about, right? Uh, like throughout the time which you were mentioning was something which mostly had to do with working out of a physical workspace, right? So how do you think this has kind of changed now that you're working remotely?
More meetings. That's the only answer. So now it's just like numerous meetings. Um, and I feel, I mean, that's a given. You can't really do anything about it, but we still try and have those squad meetings, um, where everyone is a part of that same call rather than me meeting with multiple different people in different hours. But you also, like, for me, I work across time zones. My half my team sits in US, and half the team sits in India. So there is that I'm sort of managing it right now, where I am also presenting it, presenting my work in India time zone, and then going and also presenting it later in the night when the US folks are awake. Um, but yeah, other than that, if like my entire team is in India, that's that's where in some of my projects, I think number of meetings have increased. We try to meet more often, sort of almost have like this quick sync. Impromptu calls have also increased, like, hey, listen, I have a question, rather than having like 10 emails, which is going to be, just going to take 2 days. Can we have like a quick call? Those are the kind of things that's changed. But yeah, you can, I mean, nowadays the tools are so good. You have that Figma design space, right, where collaboration, I mean, you can start whiteboarding, and you
Picture.
can, yeah. And then you also have so many other tools where you can actually whiteboard together. I had this workshop which I did with my PMs last year, while we were having our lockdown, where I sort of did this card sorting workshop, and that was all remote, right? And these guys could, like, come onto that space, move around the post-its. So I mean, you have to take that extra effort. It's not as easy as grabbing Sharpie and a post-it and running to a meeting room. You have to set the environment, set everything up before people come in. But yeah, it's all worth it. I mean, you can still have that kind of an experience.
Yeah, true. I mean, uh, as much as challenging it is with remote work, and I think we still have to maintain the essence of that, uh,
Yeah,
even though we're working remotely. Yeah.
yeah. That also
So
sort of helps you keep the the excitement levels up, because if you have these kind of little workshops and activities, I feel that everyone is just a little more in their element when they're working towards a solution, rather than hey, I have another meeting to go to. That, I mean, that's the difference.
yeah, true. So coming to the next question, right? One thing which I wanna like probably like ask you is like what would be like your probably like the most challenging design project which you have worked on, and if you could probably like mention a few details about it, would love to know.
Like, recently I did this project for Microsoft, where we were designing this space which is AI enabled, and through artificial intelligence we wanted to surface like smart suggestions for our users. Now, for me, it was the first time that I was working on um, artificial intelligence in general. So what was more than I'd say, like, challenging, what was more interesting for me was that there are so many different aspects that come into the picture when you are designing it, keeping in mind the AI aspect of it. Trust for the users comes into the picture, the trust score, how they perceive it. It's a very thin line between dictating that, hey, this is the next best thing that you should do, versus, hey, this is also something you could look at. So designing, keeping in mind how you want that message to go forth, um, that was very interesting for me, because we had like multiple different variations. It was this card format where we were talking about, try and look at this piece of information. This might be very helpful for you right now, keeping the context in mind, right? So what through the user testing, what I figured out is that the trust score of that artificial enabled piece of information, when it was above 90, and when we were highlighting that, we thought we were doing a justice by asking them not to waste their time anywhere else. But the people sort of, uh, there was a possibility that they would take it as, okay, I have to do this. So it's a, it's that message you're trying to put forth, which is very important. And these aspects, don't think about it on a daily basis when you're designing for other kind of experiences. versus AI. So I feel there are these multiple different layers that get added when you're designing for AI. And yeah, that was a learning curve for me. So I really did enjoy the entire process of working on this piece. It was, I mean, you start to understand as to why certain things need to be tested out again and again um, before you know what's working.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I remember watching. I think it was like a webinar or like a session. I think it was from awards
Hmm.
about how AI plays a role in UX. Uh, so how AI is absolutely brilliant when it's giving the kind of results which user would ideally desire. But AI becomes a huge problem when it starts giving false positives, right?
Exactly.
How it becomes a huge UX problem. So yeah, I mean that's a very interesting project and something which where I've also seen AI play more and more role today is like like relating to the fintech aspect which I work on
Hmm.
is the KYC funnel which comes right where
Right.
you're trying to understand what kind of user you have and whether this user is legit or not. So
Right.
believe it or not, fraud detection is like the biggest challenge in fintech. And there yeah, and there are obviously like some cases where legit users get flagged and like they're not allowed to go through KYC flow because the system detects them to be like a false user or sometimes it's ID theft, things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that aspect of technology, the AI part and how it plays a role in UX is very interesting and I would personally want to see like how it will shape UX and how it will play a role in UX in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very interesting space to be in right now. And also at the same time, defining certain behaviors and also seeing how people are reacting to your design. That's I mean, priceless. I mean, the fact that you're also getting to do that right now, I feel that's a very interesting space to be in and very interesting learning. And I feel that this gives you that exposure that if at all you know that you get into a much more complicated space tomorrow, which is you will know why certain things work versus why certain things don't, because you have worked on the basics of it. So yeah, that's really great. And in terms of fintech, you mentioned that KYC is something where you face challenges. So what's the process that you guys follow for figuring this out?
So the challenge comes when it comes to like something like KYC in fintech, right? Um, Most of the fintechs that I know today actually don't have their own system for KYC.
Okay.
So you actually are like using another third party software.
Hmm.
So this can be like one of the common ones is known as Onfido, which is popularly used by a lot of companies. So what happens is the user actually goes through their design, their flow. So
Hmm.
the experience immediately changes, right? So you are maintained a certain level of user experience and suddenly the whole user experience changes there because a third party application is involved. So that's definitely one thing which happens. And in general, since Arduino is a neobank, right?
Hmm.
Most of the things that we do actually requires a partner. So
Uh-huh.
it can be something like so we recently launched international transfers. So we had to partner with Vice or TransferWise before which was its previous name. So there are multiple partners involved at every step. So if you want to connect a bank account, so this is like our neobank is purely for US citizens.
Hmm.
So in the US there is this thing called as Blade. You can use that to connect your bank accounts, right? So that is like another third party application. So there are multiple applications which keep coming in, and the user experience get affected by it, right? Because it's a different experience every time you use different part of the service. So
Hmm.
how to, like, maintain a similar experience, how to control that quality which user goes through, that is a space which we are trying to work on, and has constantly been a challenge, and it's constantly something we're trying to improve or again and again.
Right. That sounds interesting. Mhm.
Yeah, the whole aspect of fintech is super
Yeah.
interesting. We have actually reached the last part of the episode, which is I
Right.
usually like to end my episodes with a bunch of rapid fire questions. Sometimes
Let's do that.
it's purely design specific. Sometimes it's very specific to the person. So yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
So whenever you're ready, we can
Yeah, yeah. Let's
get
go.
started.
Let's go. Let's do this. Hmm.
Sure. Generalist or specialist?
Specialist.
Favorite designer?
Uh, Antoni Gaudi,
Photography or sketching?
sketching.
Your favorite food?
Favorite food? Oh no, there's so much. If I have to choose, oh my God, fish. Yeah, I'll say
Uh,
malai chingri. It's a bong recipe, like a Bengali cuisine recipe. Yeah, that's the one.
Got it. One advice you would give to your younger self?
Just take a chill pill and keep doing what you're doing. I used to worry a lot when I was a child, and yeah, I would have just taken light.
Got it. So, thank you so much. We have actually reached the end of the episode. It was wonderful having you on the podcast. I had a wonderful time talking to you,
Same here.
especially about interaction design and the role of AI in design. It was absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure's on mine.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Product Stories for more such episodes.